So with the confirmation of Scream 6 now being a thing following the events of 2022's Scream movie, we now have a basic fundamental idea as to where they actually might take the Scream franchise going forward, especially with the introduction of our two main characters in the previous Scream movie, that being Samantha and Tara. But as we now continue to push forward in the franchise, are we bound to see more unexpected events occur just as we've seen in the previous Scream movie, or are we kind of bound to find ourselves in a similar position to where nothing really changes as the franchise continues? Which again could be a hit or a miss depending on the overall narrative, as joining me right now to further discuss the concept of what may or may not happen in the upcoming Scream movie is my good friend and YouTuber Marcanine. Now Mark, this is going to be a very interesting situation going into Scream 6, and for those of you out there who don't know, there is a lot that happens in Scream 5 or Scream 2022, and this video will contain a lot of spoilers for that. So if you haven't seen the film, then I do encourage you guys to kind of skip ahead, because if you don't want to find out who ends up living, who ends up dying, then this is not the video for you. But Mark, we called this down the middle. We said this a long time ago. Someone's bound to die from the trio that we know of between Gale, Sidney, and Dewey, and unfortunately enough, it was Dewey. Now, I really felt as though that kept the realism aspect of having these Ghostface movies continue, because for the most part, a lot of these killers that portray themselves as Ghostface are a bunch of lazy, non-believable, goofy Ghostfaces, and to see Dewey die the way he did, I think was very well needed, because he died protecting a group of people. He died trying to make sure that whoever this killer was essentially put in their place, because he had that experience of dealing with multiple killers throughout his history. So you kind of needed to establish the overall idea that whoever Ghostface was a legitimate threat. Now, going into Scream 6, what I wanted to ask you, and what I wanted to ask all of the viewers watching this in the comment section below, is do you think that someone else that's a prominent character within the Scream franchise, such as either Sidney or Gale, should end up dying? Now, for me personally, I think that if, as an example, Scream 6 is the final Scream movie, which I don't think is going to be the case, but let's just play off of hypotheticals. If there were to be one more Scream movie that is the literal be-all end-all of the entire franchise, then in my own opinion, I do think that someone should die, and perhaps maybe for that to be the case, I can see it to where there is a huge escalation between Sidney and whoever the new Ghostface is. I don't think that, in my own opinion, should Sidney Prescott hypothetically die from a newer killer, as an example, it would be a shock if they went on ahead to kind of do something to where she ends up dying to an older character per se, someone from her past, or maybe someone that was close to her that we've never seen before, because we understand in Scream 5 that there were lots of mix and matchups. We found out that Stu had a sister. We don't know what happened to her. There was always that idea that perhaps Stu was alive, even though a lot of people can say that he's already dead and stood dead. So in your opinion, when looking at some of the older characters, do you think that someone should perish? And if so, should it be Sidney or should it be Gale? Or to the shock of many, should it be both, in thus leaving the newer characters to leave their legacy going forward as the Scream movies continue?
All right, okay, so we know that we got two spoilers. Another guy-girl duo thing that on the internet, motivated by social media, like we get all that. Dewey dies, R.I.P. I have a feeling that the plan was always going to be like a 5, 6, and 7 based on what the talks were. I think it was just dependent upon how successful this movie was, and prior to us recording this, we saw that it made like what, more than 3.5 times the budget already. I don't know exactly based off of horror movie standards if that's considered like, you know, a massive critical success or anything, but financially speaking, I mean, that's got to be pretty good. So they're probably likely going to move on with another movie, and Neve Campbell has said that if she dies, she has to go in a respectful way, and I agree with that. You can't have a character sort of akin to Luke Skywalker, like you mentioned, just die off so stupidly, which is one of the reasons why The Last Jedi was so bad. So I think with Scream, which is a very, very far cry distant ways away from comparison in terms of franchise style, plot elements, and genre, but you still got to be respectful. You can't just kill off a character willy-nilly like that. It has to be well thought out. It has to pay respects to the character and the audience that have invested so much time into that. So with Dewey dead, I think that was sort of the right way to go. They're getting older. We've talked about what makes Scream so unique in the slasher genre, in that it always has different killers. There's something supernatural about it, other than maybe the fact that people are crazy obsessed with the Stab franchise in the Scream universe and want to keep those killings in those movies alive based off real life events. I do really like how Sidney didn't need to be in this one. I do really like that they were just trying to reboot the franchise by trying to get some killings out there and having potentially a story and movie built around their actions, which makes the it's an honor, Sidney moment with Ghostface so much more cool. But I like that she wasn't the center focus in this one. It's things that she's experienced are about that. We talked about what I wanted to see out of this movie and what I was hoping to see more, but this is acceptable. I'm not a big fan of introducing and name dropping real life reality social media like Reddit stuff. I don't really like that. It's a very hey hello kids, how do you do fellow kids type of thing that bothers me. It's a little cringe, but I think that's sort of what they were going after in that way, because obviously you're not really supposed to be rooting for the killers. They're supposed to have stupid motivations. I mean, is there even really like a good motivation to kill? So there is some leeway that you have to give with that. To answer the question specifically, we mentioned this as well, and it reminds me of the Hostel movies, if you ever saw those Eli Roth produced films. Very, very wildly gory, insanely creepy, makes you never want to travel abroad to Eastern Europe ever. The main character in the first one, he survives, gets his fingers cut off, and manages to make it home safe. And then in the beginning of the second movie, immediately killed and has his head cut off. And that's not the first time that we've seen characters be killed off so abruptly. But I do think about that in terms of, is Sidney needed anymore in the franchise? This movie proves not. Dewey, Gale, and Sid are not necessarily a part of it. They don't need to be. I get that there's like a sort of historical relation between the killings and the characters and some of the relations to the characters, nephews, daughters, and whatnot to killers from the originals. But it's not necessary, and they can't keep doing this forever. They're getting too old as characters. Actors, not necessarily, but as characters, yes. Like, you can't just keep throwing Sid in this over and over and over again unless there's a bigger plot that is like a very intricate spider web that connects them all. And right now, there's not. She shows up because they want her help, but not because she necessarily has to. And so I don't want to see if she does get killed off, like a quick killing off. But I do think it would be nice, like my ideal scenario for the next movie is some sort of, again, intricate connection between her and whoever else is picking up the mantle as a killer. And I'll expand on that in a minute. And I think it would be nice to sort of have a very quiet, peaceful few moments with her in the beginning of the movie, and then have her get killed. Maybe she sacrifices herself for her children. Maybe she sacrifices herself for a friend. Maybe someone comes into her house and something happens that has meaning, and that stirs Gale to come back and do some investigative journalism and try to help. I think it would be more important to have Sid die, because at this point, like, I don't really go to Scream movies for Sid. At least I haven't since Scream 3. So like 4 and 5 to me are not necessarily like, I'm not invested because of Sid's relation anymore. Her story is done. So there can be other killers in their universe, several states over, basing their lives on that, and she doesn't have to be in the movie at all. She can just be referenced. That's fine. That's totally okay. But I think Gale is the one that is more, how do I say this? She's the one that I think needs to stay alive because she has, like, she wants to be a part of it in a way. Like, she can write books about it, or she's open to being a part of it because she can make a fortune off of her story. Sid doesn't want to be a part of it. She wants nothing to do with it. She wants to get on with her life, and I think we should respect that from a character point of view. We need to just let her go. But we need to feel something, and we need to feel an emotional connection to that loss, and not just abruptly do it off screen, not just have her be like, hey kids, what do you want for breakfast this morning? And then some guy jumps out of a closet and stabs her in the throat. Like, I don't want that. It needs to be fair. Maybe have her put up a fight, whatever. I don't know. Maybe have this take place in a few more years where her children are in high school, just so they can be a part of it or something, or a connection in that way. I don't know. The movie isn't afraid, or the franchise isn't afraid to bring back a connection to legacy characters, killers, and survivors by having them be related to them by blood. So I think that could be something that we do in the future. I mean, in Scream 4, we had Neve Campbell's cousin, played by Emma Roberts. She was the one that did the killing, and that was dumb. I was really annoyed by that, but whatever. That's fine too. It can be her own relatives even, whatever. But I do think that 5 and 6 are definitely in the cards now. I think they probably already had an outline for 4, 5, and 6. And you pointed out something that I think is also interesting, is at the time, there were times when, at least this is from what you've seen, I haven't seen this, but you were talking about how it feels like there could have been even another killer there because of the body structure and the height of the killer in this one, which I think is also supported by the potential that Stu's sister, who is referenced in the movie and has never been introduced in the franchise, and we don't see a picture of her, we don't have an actress or a face tied to her name, but Stu's sister is there, and she apparently leaves knowing that Stu has gone crazy. So it's possible that she's also involved in some way, shape, or form, maybe. But I think it would make the most sense to have her come back. And now that we know that Billy was killed, for sure, because of the hallucinations his daughter sees of him, that we know that he's not going to come back as a surprise killer. I mean, it's still possible, but I feel like the franchise is too self-aware, and they probably wouldn't do that. They want to keep things fresh, so I doubt they would do that. But I think Stu's sister is a potential. I think that's definitely a possibility in the future, and I wouldn't be mad if Sidney was killed either a quarter of the way or halfway through Scream 5 or even earlier, as long as it's done right.
But see, here's the thing though, to be killed off by a random Ghostface, do I think it would be a little forced? Because let's just say, as an example, if we had Sam and Sidney again face off against, two Ghostfaces, again, if that were to be the case in point with the situation, then it would be more than intriguing to see Sam face off against someone that is directly connected to her, or at least someone that she knows who is a brand new person, and for Sidney to be facing off against someone from her past, or at least someone that is directly connected to her. Perhaps, maybe, again, if you want to run with that narrative, you can have Stu's sister because she was mentioned, but we really don't know what happened to her. She would have a great motive to suggest, hey, you killed my brother, you were the one that was responsible for all of this, so I'm trying to get revenge. And she would also be roughly around Sidney's age, right? So that would kind of make sense, but I don't think that Sidney, even if it were done right, should she be killed off by a random Ghostface who just wants her dead, because everything from Sidney's past had basically culminated with a motive that directly connected to her mom, the troubles of Billy, Stu, etc. So to see something like that play out now with a new killer who just wants to kill her for the sake of fame, do I think is a little redundant. So that's why if, and only if, let's just say, Sidney were to die, I think that it should be a death that comes from a either returning character or an older character that's been there since the beginning that we've never seen, perhaps lurking in the shadows or something like that. But in your opinion, do you think that it can be done right if that were to be the approach to kill off Sidney for good? Or do you think something else should occur to where the Ghostface or Ghostfaces are completely different by nature?
I think it can be done right in the right hands. I'm not married to necessarily anything as long as it's done in a respectful way. A new killer could do it. The only thing keeping Sidney alive at this point is plot armor. But I think now that we've seen the success that this movie has and how very little it relies on or leans on Sidney, you see that you don't need her for the future of the franchise. The idea that in this universe people are so obsessed with the Stab movies that they're willing to kill innocent people for the sake of a potential reboot based off of their exploits shows that Sidney she's not valuable anymore. And I think a lot of people are pissed off at the idea of Stab in the movies so far that they're willing to go to such extremes to get it done right. So I think there's something, as I mentioned, in the movie, in the franchise is very self-aware, but I think there's something that mirrors our own reality in that 4, I don't want to say 4 was a letdown, but it wasn't the best. Same with 3. 1 and 2, I think, were beautifully done. But 3 and 4, there's just something that just left you a little wanting. But they weren't by my definition bad movies. I didn't hate them. I didn't think they were bad. They were okay, average, maybe good. Okay, but they're not great. I don't know. It's hard. It's an opinion. It's subjective. It's hard. I mean, there are some objective facts that you can throw out there to point out its flaws, sure. But I think with this, it's trying to tell you in this new reboot that, hey, we recognize that 3 and 4 weren't exactly where the franchise needed to go, or maybe it could have done better, or whatever the reason, who knows? It just didn't land with fans the way that 1 and 2 did. And that happens all the time with movies. But as movies go on, as time goes on, and I mean, I hate to keep using Star Wars, but that's sort of like a lot of baselines for trilogies and triple trilogies, like tri-trilogies, right? 369. If you're willing to kill off the main characters, like Luke Skywalker, for example, I think Sidney doesn't stand a chance in this the 6th movie. I think at this point anything goes. I am surprised that she survived this one, but if she's alive now, I think the next one she's likely gonna go, and I'd be fine with that. But it doesn't have to be a legacy character. It doesn't have to be a new character. I think right now we've seen that everyone whose legacy that would be a killer has been killed off. So we're only going to be getting new characters. I would even be fine if Sidney was just referenced by name or have a picture, and then maybe have her come back in the 7th one and then she dies there, because we know we don't need her. And that's not a thing to be disrespectful. It's just that the character is not necessary to move the franchise forward, which is why the killers in this one wanted to do a reboot on their own, or a continuation based off something new and something unique, something fresh, like a whole different thing. And ever since the new Halloween movies got rebooted, you've seen that people are willing to do things that you never thought possible. I never ever would have thought that they would make a brand new trilogy based on the first one that would ignore all the other movies. Like that's a wild direction to go, and people like it. So I'm like, damn, like that's a really creative way to handle missteps. Certain franchises can't benefit from that, like Star Wars will never get remade. It'll just be continues or spin-offs or prequels or sequels or whatever, but it will never be remade, those movies with those characters. It's just not going to happen. Harry Potter is not going to happen in that same way either. You know, it's like, but I think Scream, because you can't have a killer that lives forever. I think this is how you do it. I think you just move on and be like, hey, whatever state Sidney lives in now, there can be a killer in Florida, there can be a killer in Montana or Maine or whatever. It doesn't matter anymore. She doesn't have to be involved. Hell, don't even kill her off. Just, you know, have like a farewell and whatever. Or say she died peacefully of old age in the next movie and have it be several years in the future. It doesn't matter. Something like that. Like you just whatever it is, in a respectful way, say farewell, move on, and let's go. Because you can't do the same thing you do with Michael Myers or Freddy Krueger or Jason. Like the killers are their own names, you understand? Like it's not like Ghostface is named Bob Ghostface David or James Ghostface. Like that's not part of his name. That's just his appearance. He's very unique in that way. So it can be anyone. It can be at any time. It can take place anywhere. You don't need Sidney for that. So to me, it doesn't matter who kills her. It doesn't matter if she's alive in the franchise and she's just not in the movie, just reference. It doesn't matter if she died of natural causes. She just doesn't need to be a part of it anymore. I think this movie was just sort of toying with the idea, and they did just enough where it's like, this movie takes place elsewhere. It doesn't involve her. They're related in the fact that it's a Ghostface killer killing people, and she had to deal with something similar. But like, those killers don't know her. They aren't people that are connected to her in some way. It's none of her business. She didn't even need to show up in this movie. She didn't want to. She didn't need to show up and solve it. It would have been solved otherwise. Like, she didn't have to be a part of that. But she did anyway because of, I guess, fandom and homage to her and her history in the series. But I mean, I don't mean to talk in circles, but I think you can get the idea that you can move on in this franchise without taking her forward. The character's been tortured enough. She doesn't need to be a part of it anymore. So either kill her or let her be in peace and let's move on and torture somebody else for fun.
See, this is where I think the overall film itself, whenever it does come out, could be interesting, because we learned about the motives and the characters behind this film, of course tying back with Tara, tying back with Sam. I didn't really like the whole, illusion perception of what Sam was seeing in the mirror by seeing her dad, Billy, and I think that may play a big role going into the next film. But again, we want to know your thoughts down below about who should be killed off in this next movie. Should it be Sidney? Should it be Gale? Should it be both of them? Or are some people just under the impression to suggest no, they should stick around until the very end and live on, because that's of course the legacy of Scream? I disagree with that. If you were to have kind of a surviving character out of the three, it should be at least one. Or if you really have balls, then kill off everybody and just kind of make room for the newer characters to be a thing. But again, that's all subjective, so we want to get your thoughts down in the comment section below. Sidney's death, Gale's death, who should it be and why? Thank you all so much for watching. Again, if you guys just so happen to be new to the channel and of course love Scream, then be sure to go on ahead and hit that subscribe button and turn on all notifications by clicking on the bell icon. That way you guys never miss a single video. Also, give this video a big fat thumbs up by slapping that like button down below if you're simply excited to see what may come out of the Scream franchise. Also, be sure to go on ahead and check out Marcanine's channel. I will leave his link located down in the description box below. Thank you all so much for tuning in. Thank you all so much for watching, and we'll be seeing you all in the next video. Take it easy, guys. Peace.